The baby's cry cut through the silent mansion like a knife through butter. It was a small sound, really, a whimper, a plea, but in an enormous house with its golden chandeliers and marble floors, that tiny cry echoed like thunder. Alina stopped folding the laundry. Her hands froze on a small white blanket. She listened. The cry came again, louder this time, more desperate. She waited. Surely Mr. Hale would go to his son. Surely the father would comfort his own child. But the house stayed silent, except for that heartbreaking wail. Alina's chest tightened. She knew that cry. Every mother knows that cry. It's the sound of hunger, of loneliness, of a little heart that needs comfort. She put down the blanket and walked toward the nursery. Her footsteps were quiet on the thick carpet. The baby's room was painted soft blue, filled with expensive toys that had never been touched. A crib made of the finest was stood in the center, and inside it, a tiny boy with brown eyes cried and cried. "Hush now, little one," Alina whispered. She lifted him gently. His small body was warm against her chest. "I'm here. You're not alone." The baby turned his face toward her, searching, hungry. Alina looked at the closed door. No one was coming. No one ever came. Her own body knew what to do. Since losing her daughter 6 months ago, her body still remembered being a mother. It still held the gift meant for a child who would never need again. She sat in the rocking chair by the window. Soft afternoon light spilled across the floor. The baby's cries stopped as she began to feed him. His tiny hand wrapped around her finger. His eyes, brown and trusting, looked up at her. "There now," she said softly. "Better, isn't it?" Peace filled the room. The kind of peace that comes when a need is met, when hunger turns to fullness, when loneliness becomes connection. Then the front door slammed downstairs. Alina's heart jumped. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Fast, angry, the nursery door flew open and crashed against the wall. Richard Hale stood in the doorway like a storm ready to break. His expensive suit was rumpled. His face was red. His eyes were wild. "What are you doing?" His voice was so loud the baby flinched in Alina's arms. She held the child closer. "Mr. Hale, Get away from my son." But Alina didn't move. She kept the baby safe against her chest, one hand protecting his small head. She looked up at Richard with steady eyes. "He was crying, sir. He was hungry." "Hungry?" Richard's laugh was sharp and mean. "So you decided to—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. His hands shook at his sides. "Do you know what you've done? I fed a hungry baby. You will make my son black." The words hung in the air like poison. Alina felt them strike her chest, but she didn't look away. She'd heard words like these before. Words meant to hurt. Words meant to make her feel small. But she wasn't small. Not now. Not with this innocent child in her arms. "Sir," she said quietly, "your son is already who he is. Nothing I do can change that. But he was crying for an hour, and no one came. That's not your concern." Richard stepped into the room. "You're the maid. You clean. You cook. You don't. Again he struggled to speak. "This is inappropriate. This is wrong." "What's wrong?" Alina said, and her voice was still calm, still gentle. "Is letting a baby cry alone until his voice goes hoarse." Richard's face turned darker. "How dare you judge me? Do you know who I am? Do you know what I built? I could buy and sell you 10 times over." "Yes, sir, you could." "Then why are you still sitting there? Why are you holding my son like he's precious?" Alina finished. "Like he matters?" Richard's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. The baby had fallen asleep against Alina's chest. His small face was peaceful now. "Relax. Safe. Look at him," Richard whispered, and something cracked in his voice. "Look what you've done. He's content with you. Not with me. With the maid. He's content with whoever answers when he cries." Alina said, "I don't want this. I don't want him thinking." Richard turned away, ran his hand through his hair. "His mother died giving birth to him. He's all I have left of her. And now you're trying to replace her." "No, sir." Alina's voice was soft but firm. I could never replace her, but this baby needs care. He needs feeding. He needs holding. These things don't wait until it's convenient. Richard spun back around. What are you saying? That I'm a bad father? I've given him everything. Look at this room. Look at this house. He has the best of everything. Except you. The words were simple, quiet, but they hit like thunder. Richard stared at her. His chest rose and fell quickly. His jaw clenched. You have no right. I have no right. Alina agreed, but I have eyes, and I have ears. And for 3 weeks, I've watched this baby cry alone. I've seen you walk past this door like he doesn't exist. I've heard you tell visitors you're too busy, too important to. Enough! The baby stirred in his sleep, but didn't wake. Richard's hands were fists now. You forget your place, woman. This is M.Y. House. My son, my life. You are here to serve, not to lecture me about fatherhood. Alina stood slowly, cradling the baby. She was not as tall as Richard. She did not wear expensive clothes. She did not have money or power. But when she looked at him, Richard felt like he was a small one. Then I will say only one more thing, she said. This baby doesn't know about money. He doesn't understand power or position. He doesn't see skin color or social class. He only knows who holds him when he's scared, who feeds him when he's hungry, who comes when he cries. She walked toward the crib and gently laid the sleeping baby down. Right now, Mr. Hale, that person is me. Not because I want to take anything from you, but because someone has to love him. Richard watched her tuck a blanket around his son. His throat felt tight. His eyes burned. Get out, he whispered. Alina turned to face him. Sir, get out. Get out of this room. Get out of my sight. She walked past him, her head held high, her steps quiet and dignified. At the door, she paused without looking back. He'll wake in 2 hours. He'll be hungry again. Then she was gone. Richard stood alone in the nursery. The afternoon light had turned golden. Dust motes floated in the air. His son slept peacefully in the expensive crib, and Richard felt more empty than he'd ever felt in his life. His hands were still shaking, but now he wasn't sure if it was from anger or from shame. Richard couldn't sleep that night. He paced his bedroom back and forth, like a caged animal. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Alina's face. Calm, steady, unafraid. Who does she think she is? He muttered to the darkness. But the darkness had no answer. At 2 a.m, the baby cried. Richard sat up in bed, his heart pounding. He stared at his closed door. The nursery was just down the hall. Such a short distance, but it felt like miles. The crying continued. Richard put his hands over his ears, but he could still hear it. That small, desperate sound. Then he heard something else. Soft footsteps. A door opening. The crying stopped. She was there again. Alina. Richard threw off his blankets and stormed down the hall. This time he didn't slam the door. He pushed it open quietly. Alina sat in the rocking chair, the baby at her chest. Moonlight came through the window, painting everything silver and blue. She looked up at Richard, but didn't stop rocking. You, Richard said. His voice was hoarse. Why are you still doing this? Because he needs it. I told you to stop. No, sir. Alina's voice was gentle but firm. You told me to get out of your sight. I did, but you didn't say anything about the baby. Richard's jaw clenched. You're twisting my words. I'm hearing what you didn't say. She looked down at the baby. You want him cared for. You're just afraid to admit you can't do it alone. I'm not afraid of anything. Then why are you trembling? Richard looked down at his hands. She was right. They were shaking. He sank into the other chair in the room, suddenly too tired to stand. What do you want from me? Nothing, sir. Liar. Everyone wants something. Money? A promotion? Are you trying to blackmail me? Alina smiled sadly. I want nothing you can give, except maybe for you to look at your son. Really look at him. I look at him. When? Between meetings? Between phone calls? When was the last time you held him, Mr. Hale? Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't remember. That's what I thought, Alina said softly. His mother died, Richard whispered. Every time I look at him, I see her. I see what I lost. It hurts too much. So you hurt him instead. The words were like a slap. Richard's head snapped up. How dare you? Your pain doesn't give you permission to ignore his. Alina's eyes flashed. He didn't ask to be born. He didn't ask for his mother to die. He's innocent, but you punish him anyway. I don't punish him. I give him everything. Everything except what matters. Alina stood and walked closer to Richard. The baby slept peacefully in her arms. Look at him, sir. Please. Just look. Richard didn't want to, but something in Alina's voice made him obey. He looked at his son. Really looked. The baby had his mother's nose, her long eyelashes, but he had Richard's chin, Richard's ears. He was so small, so fragile, so perfect. When was the last time you touched him? Alina asked quietly. Richard's throat closed up. When was the last time you sang to him? Talk to him? Let him know you're there. Stop. When was the last time you were his father, instead of just a man who pays the bills? I said stop. Richard's shout echoed in the room, but Alina didn't flinch. The baby didn't even wake. You're so afraid, Alina said, and her voice was full of sadness. Afraid he'll be loved by someone you consider beneath you. Afraid that my skin color will somehow stain his soul. But the only thing staining him is your absence. You don't understand, Richard said, and his voice broke. People will talk. They'll see how close you are to him. They'll say things. They'll judge. Let them. Easy for you to say. You don't have a reputation to protect. No, Alina agreed. I have something more important. I have love to give, and that baby needs it whether it comes from black hands or white hands. He just needs it. Richard put his head in his hands. Why do you care so much? Why risk your job? Why fight me? Alina was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Because I had a daughter once. Richard looked up. She was beautiful. Alina continued, staring out the window, perfect in every way. She had your son's eyes. That same wondering look, like the world was full of magic. Where is she now? Gone. The word fell like a stone. She got sick when she was 4 months old. The fever came so fast. I rushed her to the hospital, but her voice cracked. They made me wait. Said other patients came first. By the time they saw her, it was too late. I'm sorry, Richard whispered. She died in my arms. Tears rolled down Alina's cheeks. I sang to her. I held her. I told her how much I loved her. And then she was gone. The room was silent, except for the baby's soft breathing. My body didn't understand. Alina said, for months afterward, I still had milk, still had arms that ached to hold her, still had lullabies with no one to sing them to. She looked down at Richard's son. When I heard your baby crying that first night, 3 weeks ago, I knew that sound. I knew that loneliness. And I couldn't. Her voice broke. I couldn't let another baby feel abandoned. Not when I had love to give. Not when I could help. Richard felt something crack open inside his chest. So you see, Mr. Hale, I don't do this to hurt you. I don't do this to overstep. I do this because I know what it's like to lose everything. And I won't watch you throw away what I would give anything to have back. I'm not throwing him away, Richard said weakly. Aren't you? Alina's gaze was piercing. You avoid him. You hide from him. You let strangers care for him while you bury yourself in work. If that's not throwing away, what is it? Richard had no answer. He's going to grow up, Alina continued. One day, he'll be old enough to notice, old enough to remember, and he'll ask himself why his father never wanted him, why he wasn't enough to make you stay. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Mr. Hale. My daughter dying wasn't fair. Your wife dying wasn't fair. But your son being neglected? That's a choice. Your choice. Richard felt tears burning in his eyes. I don't know how to be his father. Then learn. What if I fail? You're already failing. Alina's words were harsh, but her voice was kind. The question is, will you keep failing, or will you try? Richard looked at his son again. The baby's small chest rose and fell. His tiny fingers curled into fists. He looked so peaceful in Alina's arms. So safe. So loved. Why doesn't he cry when you hold him? Richard asked. Because I answer when he calls. Because I'm present. Because he knows I won't leave him alone. He doesn't know me. Then introduce yourself. Alina walked over and, before Richard could protest, placed the baby in his arms. Richard froze. The baby felt impossibly light, impossibly precious, impossibly terrifying. I can't. You can. Alina guided his arms into the right position. Support his head. Just like that. See? You're doing it. The baby stirred and opened his eyes. Those brown eyes, his mother's eyes, looked up at Richard. Richard's breath caught. Hello, he whispered. Hello, son. The baby blinked, studied his father's face. And then, miracle of miracles, he smiled. It was just a little smile, maybe even just gas. But to Richard, it was everything. He smiled at me. Of course he did, Alina said softly. You're his father. Richard felt the tears spill over. They ran down his face and dripped onto the baby's blanket. His whole body shook with sobs he'd been holding back for weeks. I'm so sorry, he wept. I'm so sorry. I've been so afraid, so angry, so lost. Alina placed her hand on Richard's shoulder. It's not too late, she said. It's never too late to start again. Richard sat in that nursery chair until dawn broke over the city. He held his son the entire time. Sometimes the baby slept. Sometimes he was awake, staring at his father with those wondering eyes. But Richard never let go. Alina had left hours ago, slipping out quietly to let father and son have their moment. But her words stayed behind, wrapped around Richard's heart like a gentle hand. It's never too late to start again. As pink light filled the sky, the baby began to fuss. Richard's arms tensed. Panic fluttered in his chest. Sure, he tried. It's okay. Daddy's here. But the fussing turned to crying. The crying turned to wailing. Richard stood and paced, bouncing the baby gently like he'd seen Alina do. But it didn't work. The baby's face turned red. His little fists shook in the air. Please, Richard begged. Please don't cry. I don't know what you need. The door opened. Alina stood there in her simple dress, her eyes kind but knowing. He's hungry, sir. Richard felt his cheeks burn with shame. I can't feed him like you do. No, but you can hold the bottle while I prepare it. You can sing to him while he eats. You can be present. She returned moments later with a warm bottle. She showed Richard how to hold it, how to angle it, so the baby wouldn't swallow air. There, she said softly. See? He just needed this. And you. Richard watched his son drink. The baby's hand wrapped around Richard's finger. Such a small hand. Such a tight grip. I've wasted so much time, Richard whispered. Then, don't waste any more. Over the next few days, something changed in that mansion. Richard canceled his meetings. He ignored his phone. He spent every hour learning how to be a father. Alina taught him how to change diapers. Even though Richard complained it was disgusting, she showed him how to give a bath without getting soap in the baby's eyes. She hummed lullabies until Richard learned the tunes and could sing them himself. You're a natural, she said one afternoon, watching Richard rock his son to sleep. I'm terrified every second, Richard admitted. That's how you know you care. But the old Richard wasn't completely gone. One evening, his business partner visited, a man named Thomas who wore suits as expensive as Richard's and carried the same air of superiority. Richard, Thomas boomed, walking into the living room. Where have you been? We got deals to close, money to make. He stopped when he saw Richard on the floor, play with his son. What are you doing? Playing with my boy. Thomas laughed. Surely the nanny can do that. We need to talk about the merger. Later. Later? Richard, you're acting strange. This isn't like you. Richard looked up at his old friend. Maybe the old me needed a change. Thomas's eyes narrowed. Then he noticed Alina in the doorway, holding fresh towels. His lip curled. "Is that the maid? The one you told me about?" Richard stiffened. "Her name is Alina." "Right. Well, Richard, people are talking. They say she's too involved with your son. They say it's inappropriate. You should fire her before." "Before what?" Richard's voice went cold. "Before my son learns that kindness doesn't have a color? Before he understands that love is more important than reputation?" Thomas blinked. "What happened to you?" "I woke up." Richard stood, holding his son against his chest. "For weeks, I was so worried about what people would think. So afraid that Alina's love would somehow damage my son. But you know what would really damage him? Growing up to be like I was. Cold, prejudiced, empty. You're being ridiculous." "No, I'm being a father." Richard walked closer to Thomas. "Alina saved my son when I was too blind to see he needed saving. She fed him when I let him go hungry. She held him when I was too cowardly to try. And you know what? My son is better for it." Thomas looked disgusted. "You've gone soft." "No, I've become human. If you're moved by this story, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to see more stories that touch the heart and change perspectives." After Thomas left, Alina approached Richard carefully. "That was brave, sir. More understanding and more second chances. Thank you for reading. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing that people can change." "Don't call me sir anymore," Richard said. "Call me Richard." "I couldn't." "You can. You've earned it." He looked at her with genuine warmth. "You've earned so much more than that." Weeks turned into months. The mansion that once echoed with silence now filled with laughter. Baby sounds. Singing. Life. Richard cut his work hours in half. He hired help for the business, so he could be home for his son's first smile, his first laugh, his first time rolling over. And Alina was there for all of it, too. One day, Richard found her in the nursery, standing by the window. She looked sad. "What's wrong?" he asked. She wiped her eyes quickly. "Nothing. Just thinking about my daughter. Today would have been her first birthday." Richard's heart ached for her. He walked over and stood beside her. "What was her name?" "Grace." "Grace," Richard repeated. "That's beautiful." She was beautiful. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Richard said, "I want to do something. If you'll let me." He pulled out his phone and made several calls. Alina watched, confused. "There's a children's hospital across town," Richard said. "The same one where your daughter—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've just made a donation. A big one. They're going to build a new emergency wing. No family will ever have to wait again. They'll name it after Grace." Alina's hand flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. I can't bring her back. But I can make sure her memory helps other children, other mothers." Alina hugged him then. A real hug. The kind that says thank you and I forgive you and we're family all at once. Richard hugged her back. His son, now 6 months old, babbled happily from his playpen. He didn't care about the color of the arms that held him. He didn't notice the difference in skin or status or background. He just knew love when he felt it. One evening, Richard sat in a rocking chair, the same chair where this whole journey began. His son was drowsy, fighting sleep, making little sound of protest. Stubborn, just like your dad, Richard whispered with a smile. He began to sing. It was a lullaby Alina had taught him. His voice was rough and off-key, but his son didn't care. The baby's eyes grew heavy. His breathing slowed. Alina passed by the open door and paused. She leaned against the doorframe, watching. Richard looked up and saw her. He smiled. "Thank you," he mouthed. She smiled back and placed her hand over her heart. Some conversations don't need words. After the baby fell asleep, Richard carefully placed him in the crib. He tucked the blanket around him, not too tight, just right, exactly how Alina had shown him. He stood there for a long time, watching his son breathe. "I promise," he whispered. "I promise I'll never forget what I almost lost. I promise to see people for who they are, not what they look like. I promise to be the father you deserve." The baby slept on, peaceful and safe. Richard thought back to that day months ago. The day he'd burst into this room filled with rage and prejudice. The day he'd shouted those terrible words at a woman who'd shown his son nothing but love. He thought about how close he'd come to missing everything. How his pride and fear had nearly cost him the most important relationship of his life. If this story touched you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change. And subscribe for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Daddy will do better, he promised his sleeping son. I'll fail sometimes. I'll make mistakes. But I'll never stop trying. And I'll never, ever let you feel alone again. He kissed his son's forehead gently. From the hallway, Alina wiped tears from her cheeks. She'd heard every word. She thought about her daughter Grace. She thought about the pain she'd carried for so long. And she realized that pain had transformed into something beautiful. It had given her the strength to save another child, to change a father's heart, to prove that love knows no color, no boundary, no limit. Richard turned and saw her in the doorway. "Will you have tea with me?" he asked. "I want to hear more stories about Grace, if you're willing to share them." Alina nodded. "I'd like that." They walked downstairs together. No longer master and servant, but two people who'd been broken by loss and rebuilt by love. Behind them, the baby slept soundly in his crib. He dreamed peaceful dreams, the kind that come to children who know they are loved. His future was bright now, because his father had finally learned the most important lesson of all, that the measure of a person isn't the color of their skin, the size of their bank account, or the power of their position. It's the size of their heart, and the courage to admit when they're wrong, and the strength to change. Richard had been given a second chance. Not everyone gets one, but those who do must treasure it. As the moon rose over the mansion that night, 3 hearts beat inside its walls. 3 people who'd found each other in the midst of pain and prejudice. One who'd been lost and found himself. One who'd been broken and found purpose. And one tiny boy who would grow up knowing that he was loved beyond measure. Not despite the differences between his father and the woman who'd saved them both, but because of them. If this story moved you, changed you, or made you think differently about someone, please share it. Stories like this remind us that transformation is possible if we have the courage to let it happen. Subscribe for more stories that challenge hearts and change minds, because the world needs more love.